And we're live. What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in. Adam and I are both having some connection issues, so let us know how this connection comes through. Can you see us clearly? Can you hear us clearly? If the quality is that bad, then we're just going to reschedule this. But we said we'll give it a shot. I see the comment section is already vibrant. Thank you all for tuning in. Let us know where you're joining in from. Today, we are going to be reviewing a video released by Bad Empanada about Corey Gil Shuster from the Ask Project. Now, maybe, Adam, it makes sense to start by just acknowledging our biases that Corey is a friend of ours. But those who know this channel know that we care about truth and honesty more than we care about protecting our friends. Well, at least I do. I won't speak for Adam, but I have a feeling he's the same. And if Bad Empanada's right, I think we'll acknowledge it, and there might be some truth to what he's saying. Anything you want to say before we dive in?
Yeah, is it also fair to say that we asked Bad Empanada if he wants to hop on the stream and comment in real time? I think there was at least some invitation that wasn't met very well.
Yeah, let me give some background. So interestingly, I reached out to Bad Empanada for the first time a few months ago. He did a video on the death toll in Gaza. I emailed him. I let him know that I appreciated his work. I pointed out one mistake that he made, but essentially it was a nice email appreciating the work he does. And I titled it "Former IDF Soldier Appreciating the Work You're Doing." I figured that's a catchy tagline. Never heard back from him, which happens. He probably gets a lot of emails. I then emailed him again 5 days ago after seeing the Corey video, seeing if he'd like to join for a stream with a conversation with Corey on the channel. Just today, just 3 hours ago, he finally got back to me. His email goes, quote, "Actually insane that you introduce yourself as a mass baby killer and expect that to give you anything you say authority rather than make me wonder why you're roaming free and not in a cell on death row." Absolutely unhinged. Now, I responded with kindness. I always try to give it another go. I go, well, truth is, I never harmed a civilian in my time in the IDF. Is your position that every Israeli who ever served should be killed? Do you think Palestinian liberation is more likely to succeed with the support of Israeli allies? Or is more like without the support of Israeli allies? And then I go, if you feel strongly about this, happy to debate and discuss this with you. I also then invited him to join the live stream tonight. He responds, "Please go to Gaza and turn yourself into the nearest police station." To which I responded, "Sure thing, buddy." So,
so you think he might not hop on the stream? Is that what we're saying?
I have a feeling he will not. Now, I tweeted a few weeks ago acknowledging that many of those who follow the work that I do, who follow the reports I've done on Gaza, that they might support the work I'm doing, but they're not true allies because they actually are not looking at this conflict through the lens of universal humanism. They think that you achieve a justice by creating an injustice to another group of people. So I do notice that I have some followers that might support me, but we're not true allies because at the end of the day, they don't care about the Jews living on the land. Whereas my perspective is we need to care for everybody living on the land. And if your solution involves jailing or killing 70% of Israelis, right? I imagine that's about the rate of Israelis who have served in the IDF, then you're just irrelevant, hateful, and anti-humanist. So on one hand, I appreciate a lot of the work Bad Empanada does, but he's definitely not an ally. He's not, we're not standing side by side to find a just solution. He's supporting massive injustice. He believes that is his way to achieve justice. Not to mention, that's just not grounded in reality. Do you really think?
Adar, that's the thing. Like, it's like I don't know much about him, but just like this reaction.
Me neither, by the way.
So if it is indicative of his kind of perspectives, he's also not an ally to Palestinians. It doesn't seem like, simply because he seems so detached from reality.
Correct. But there's enough detached people that he can grow a big following of other detached people, and they have their cute little echo chamber where they feel they're doing something good for the world, and perhaps some good comes of it, right? Like he does bring awareness on important issues, so I'm not going to take that away from him. But in terms of him being like a stable individual that's just a voice of reason and peace, he's just not. Now, with that doesn't mean the video we're about to review is wrong. He might still be right. So let's.
Right. He might be unhinged. He might be emotionally unstable. He might be intellectually not there. I don't know, right? I haven't really analyzed any of his stuff, but he might still make excellent points with respect to the Ask Project.
Exactly.
So
and in general, right?
And in general. So just because he had this interaction with you doesn't mean anything. Can't actually speak about the quality of the arguments he's making. And I think we'll have to just evaluate the arguments on their own merits.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to do. And, Bad Empanada, if you do happen to watch this, you're invited on anytime for a conversation. I think that could be quite valuable. Anyways, you want to pull the video up?
Can we pull it? Okay, we can pull it. If people haven't seen it yet, we can.
Yeah, I think we should. It's 8 minutes long. Let's put it on 1.5 speed. And
yeah. We'll and should we stop along the way and just kind of comment?
Exactly. Every time there's a point that you think's worth addressing, stop it. If I see a point, I'll let you know. And
yeah. Okay, so let's do this.
Yeah, critical thinking over doctrine. Great point. A lot of people are caught up with dehumanization as they fight dehumanization. Exactly. And like that same psychological profile that he currently possesses, that same psychological profile, if he were born in Israel, he'd be a Kahanist. Right? Like it's not. No, seriously. You could. There's certain profiles of individuals, and you put them on the other side. That's what it is. Literally,
that's probably right. Okay. Let's see. Can people see this?
No, now they can.
Now they can. Okay, nice.
Wait, now they can.
Maybe I'll make it a theater mode. Okay. And I suspect the audio is going to come through as well, right? Let's try this.
Yeah, it should.
Okay.
You might have seen the channel. It's like called the Ask Project.
It's. I think the site is muted.
No, I hear it.
You can hear it. Oh, I couldn't hear it.
You might have seen the channel. It's like called the Ask Project by Corey.
We'll put it on 1.5.
Yeah. If it's annoying for someone, you could slow this part down to 0.75 and then watch it regular. Well, those watching after the live stream.
Okay. Let's do this.
You might have seen the channel. It's like called the Ask Project by Corey Gil Shuster, who is a Canadian. I think he's Jewish. I mean, he has to be Jewish. How else did he move to Israel? So he's a Canadian Jewish guy who voluntarily moved to Israel. And now he runs a YouTube channel where he goes around interviewing people. And it's easy to get fooled by him, because you might think that he's doing this out of a genuine desire to see both sides. Like maybe he's not like a Zionist.
It's 6 minutes. I think. Can we do it with just one?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think
if you prefer 1x, that's fine. But he already made a point that I'm sure you want to say, that he's coming in it. He's talking about his agenda.
Exactly. So let's just.
You might have seen the channel. It's like called the Ask Project by Corey Gil Shuster, who is a Canadian. I think he's Jewish. I mean, he has to be Jewish. How else did he move to Israel? So he's a Canadian.
First of all, just seems a bit unnecessary, but okay. By the way, I just so that it's clear to everybody, when I'm approaching a video like this, I'm trying to look at the title to see what his claim is. He says Corey Gil Shuster is a Zionist propagandist. That's what I want to keep in mind. I want him to build a case that he's a Zionist propagandist. So far, all he's doing is talking about Corey and his background. Okay.
Jewish guy who voluntarily moved to Israel, and now he runs a YouTube channel where he goes around interviewing people. And it's easy to get fooled by him, because you might think that he's doing this out of a genuine desire to see both sides. Like maybe he's not like a Zionist or anything. Maybe he moved to Israel when he was like a naive, idealistic kid, and he's changed since then. Now he's trying to reveal how racist and hateful and genocidal Israelis are, while giving a voice to Palestinians or anything. But if you
I was going to stop it right there too. So we're on the same.
There's a lot here. What do you think?
Wait, Adam. First, I think it's important to let people know you've actually gone with Corey to film some of these videos.
Yeah. So
we both know Corey, but you've actually worked with him, so you have an inside scoop on this.
Yeah. So every time I go to Israel, which is maybe a few times a year or so, we try to rent a car and just go wherever. So Corey and I have now done this a bunch of times for many, many years. So you might have heard my voice kind of like in the background sometimes. We're interviewing people, and I especially like to go to the settlements, and also it's I try to go, but like I think that one thing to notice here is that it's pretty difficult for him to get places for Corey. Sometimes he has to take the bus or whatever, or wait for people to come, or it's fairly difficult. So when there's supporters and people that are like supporting him on Patreon or whatever, maybe he has sometimes some money to go and like rent a car and go somewhere. But it's very difficult. So every time I go, I rent a car. So we're trying to then go to like more remote and more distant places that are more difficult to get to just with public transportation. So yeah, so I've spent many hours with him. Gandalf is saying, "Wow, that was you." Yes, you might hear me there. A lot of the stuff like in the settlements is stuff that we've done together, and also in some of like the director's cut, kind of like the behind the scenes stuff that sometimes he shares with folks that are supporters. You'll probably have seen me much more there. So yeah, that's just a good kind of caveat.
And before you continue, just something about his framing. What he's doing is he's essentially presenting a false dichotomy here. You're either a Zionist and you support everything Israel does, or you're an anti-Zionist and your goal is to reveal the crimes Israel's committing. That's essentially how he presented this. Yeah. But there is a vast spectrum in between. And Corey, I think, very neatly falls into the category of a left-wing Zionist, which means he supports Israel's right to exist, likely supports that in the form of a two-state solution, but is also very critical of certain Israeli policies as well as right-wing Israeli government. This is the liberal Zionist position or left-wing Zionist position, which is very different from like a centrist Zionist or a right-wing Zionist. But if hearing just how he opened this up, it's one or the other. There's no in between. And just to build on that, around 20% of Palestinians living on the land support a two-state solution. So they too, by that definition, are Zionists. Maybe they should also be put in jail and killed, like he suggests. Anyways,
I'm trying to think about like when he says, you might be fooled by him that maybe he's just like trying to highlight the injustice. That would be a certain bias. That would be an agenda that he has. That would be like some politics that would be injecting into his project, right? So that sounds like one thing that he's saying. Maybe you would be fooled by him thinking he has an agenda that is political. That seems to be the framing that he's making, which I think is not very helpful for his own case. You might be fooled into thinking that he has this kind of benevolent agenda.
Right. That's a good point.
Okay. But he might not have that agenda. Which agenda might he have? We have to wait and see if he makes a case.
Good point, yeah.
You actually watch his videos and pay attention to them, you'll see he gets incredibly argumentative with the Palestinians who he interviews, to the point that his translator often has to stop him. He's like a kind of typical, I wouldn't even say liberal Zionist, but like a Zionist who thinks that like the outright genocidal Israelis go a bit too far, and who still is like very much an anti-Palestinianist racist. There was like a video on his channel, which I'm not going to be able to find now. There's no way. There's way too many videos.
So he actually did provide clarity on the false dichotomy that he initially presented, which I called him out on, but here he is providing clarity. So I do want to acknowledge that.
Well, you want to spell it out?
No. I haven't really watched this whole thing thoroughly. So I said that he started with a false dichotomy, presenting it as you're either a Zionist or you're an anti-Zionist, but now he does acknowledge he's a liberal Zionist and does criticize the Israeli government. So I didn't recognize that he provides that nuance afterwards. So we can continue.
Distinctly remember it from years ago, but it was a video where he has this one specific interview with like a Palestinian shopkeeper. I believe it was in Jerusalem, or I think it was Jerusalem. And the Palestinian shopkeeper was a citizen of Israel, and he was like talking to Corey, and it's supposedly like a neutral interview, right? Like he's giving them a voice. But the Palestinian shopkeeper like responds to a question that Corey asked him, and it was like, so like, why do you live here? Like, why don't you live somewhere else? And the shopkeeper's like, well, I'm not allowed to live in Jewish areas. And Corey like replies to him, oh, that's not true. There's no law against that. And he's like, no, it doesn't matter if there's no law against it. Like no Jew would ever rent me an apartment. No Jew would ever rent me a shop. And Corey continues arguing with this guy, like trying to deny the segregation, trying to deny apartheid. And his translator starts saying like, no, Corey, you know that what he's saying is true. You know that what he's saying is true. And then it cuts. It's going to be impossible to find this video because I don't even remember what the actual topic of that video was. And it was from years ago. But that's like emblematic.
First of all, if anybody has access to that video, if you guys remember it off the top of your head or whatever, it'd be great to see it.
Of the kind of the way that his ideology sort of seeps through in his videos very often. And
okay, it's emblematic. Whatever might have happened in that video seems to Bad Empanada that it's emblematic of the kind of bias that seeps into his videos. Is that what he was saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Now, what I will say is, if you're watching, if you're a Zionist and you're watching his videos, you may perceive he has an anti-Israel bias, right? We often, depending on which side of the extreme we stand on, we perceive those often standing in the middle as extreme. That said, it very well may be the case that he does have some selective pushback based on his ideology. I think that's possible. He's giving an example, but not really showing it, so we can't comment on it. And I personally am not trusting his research enough to see if he checked if he does this pushback also when he speaks to Israelis, right? Like,
which I remember very clearly.
He's trying to assess the situation honestly. I'm not sure.
Exactly. Like, this is the kind of thing that he does to Israelis all the time. He also does that to the Palestinians some of the time. But I also think he has a duty to his audience to press some points, right? So I think it is. I watch it because I expect him to ask follow-up questions, but he's very particular about this. Like, even when you include too much of your own voice in it, he will refuse to include his own voice too often. So, for example, like, we went one time to Ariel, to the settlement Ariel, and I got in a I was recording and I was asking a question, and then I did too many follow-ups where now my voice was like prominent, and he's like, it's too much. Like, we can't be sharing it. Like, every now and then you can add whatever sarcasm. That's fine. That's cute. That's great. He's a human being after all, right? Do that. That's fine. But as soon as you are now shifting the conversation in a particular direction, he's like, I don't want to do it. So we ended up getting cut. I was a little self-conscious for the rest of the trip. I didn't want to ask too many questions. But I think if anything, it speaks highly to him being entertaining, and also a human being who's been doing this now for what, like, forever. He's not getting paid for this. Few people ever are like patrons or whatever. Yeah, so he's having some fun, and he's a human, and even if he has bias in one way or particular, means nothing. It still doesn't build up case that he's a Zionist propagandist.
Correct, especially when fundamentally, I mean, he literally gets questions from audience members and then asks them. That's and right. Even if you could point to some selective pushback, at the end of the day, the overwhelming majority of what he's doing is asking simple questions and allowing people to answer. And he doesn't cut out any answers, right? He puts in 100.
He never cuts out answers. He never cuts out.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no cherry picking. Before you continue, Ruth Stern asks, can I ask about Bad Empanada? What is his race? What is his connection to Palestine? What is his accent? So I actually did some research prior to this. He is Australian, Argentinian, I think, nationality-wise. Ethnically, maybe his name sounds a little Greek.
What's his name?
So and his connection to Palestine, I think he's just passionate about it. I think he identifies as a Marxist if the wiki fandom page was correct. Anyways.
Yeah. It's but I guess the point is that he still seems to think that it's emblematic of what you see on the videos. I'm not sure that I'm seeing it. Like, maybe people in the audience have a different perspective on this, but
yeah, when we finish, we'll open it up to a call-in show. I'm sure a lot of viewers have watched the show. Let's hear what the audience thinks about Corey, because I've heard other people critique him. So we could open it up.
That's fine. It's just that, first of all, the questions are not his. It's other people that ask questions. And what is it? 90% of 99% of the content, you barely even hear Corey. Right, he's asking like the same question over and over and over again, and every now and then I think he's asking the kinds of questions that people in the audience would be curious about. And every now and then he adds a little cherry of some fun kind of like spin or whatever in a totally, in my opinion, totally neutral way. Now, could it be that he has some bias? Of course he could have some bias. He's a human being, right? But in which bias does that lead? Like, is he biased against settlers? Is he biased against Palestinians? Is he biased against? Yeah.
Right. And, just to build on that, I mean, the other day he released a video interviewing Israelis what they think about civilian death toll in Gaza. And I mean, that is the worst form of Zionist propaganda imaginable. That you could very easily conclude that video acts as a very strong piece of anti-Zionist propaganda.
Yeah.
It demonizes Israelis to show that they don't care about civilians in Gaza, but he interviewed it, heard very difficult answers, and uploaded it, right?
Bro, listen to this. So this is like maybe a week after October 7th. You guys can find the video. It was like the first video after October 7th. I was there. We were texting. We're like, should we go and record? And we both thought to ourselves, this is likely to be the worst time to create a video because emotions are high and everybody's going to say horrific stuff. And then the next thought that came to mind was him saying, right, but choosing not to record right now is editorializing. That is our bias seeping in. You can't allow that. We have to go and record nevertheless. That to me is a commitment to an objective, to an agenda that is, I would say, as bias-free as it gets. Is he still biased when he goes asking? Of course. The fact he decides to go despite thinking that there might be a heightened whatever, like it might seem as radical as it gets, but decides to do it nevertheless. That to me speaks to the true character of the project and to him. It's something that would be very difficult for people to know who have not been.
Great point. And actually, let me even add to that if I were in his shoes, I'm not sure I would do that after October 7th because I wouldn't want to unnecessarily demonize Israelis and Palestinians when they're at their most extreme. I very well may have decided, you know what, let's wait a year, let's let things calm down. So it's a good point. He's showing a level of
not just that, dude. Like I think we were talking about the fact that, okay, by the way, do people know what he does? Like
for a living?
For a living?
No.
Like this is I forgot to mention this point, but like this Bad Empanada guy says that he just came to Israel. He's just probably just because of his ethnicity he's allowed in. What's he doing there? Recording videos. The dude, I don't want to speak too much of it, but he's involved in, actually, maybe this is political, but like he's deeply involved in like academic circles that discuss like peace and conflict resolution, right? Like that's the stuff that he does. That's the stuff that he does for a living, right? So he was telling me about a professor who was saying something about, Ruth's saying he's a conflict mediator. Somebody was telling him, he's a professor, and he came up with some research that says that like something like, I don't remember the number, it was like 30 or 40% of all Israelis believe X, and that X was a horrific X, right? Yeah, exactly. He manages the Tel Aviv University program for peace and conflict management for the masters. So one of the professors there told him that he just did a research where it's like 30 or 40% of Israelis believe something really like insane and radical. And so that thought, that feeling was clouding our trip. And nevertheless, we decided to go out and ask Israelis. Why? Because that's the most honest thing. And the audience should be expecting that type of honesty. Choosing not to go and record would be dishonest. Yeah, despite us thinking that. And then afterwards, when Israelis didn't say the horrific things that they said in the last video that we saw a couple of weeks ago, they did not say nearly as horrific a thing as we imagined. We were both a little bit surprised. And we're like, we should send this to that professor.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, let's continue.
And he left a comment on my recent video. I'm going over Jewish exceptionalism in that loner box clip, which I screenshotted here, which makes his opinion very clear. Corey Gil Shuster, Art Project, that's his official channel. What a load of BS. The Turks, Sudanese, Syrians, Chinese, Russians, Congolese, etc. do the same and much worse, and almost no one is speaking out. The Jews do the same thing, as there is an industry of media, protesters, and talking heads in a whipped-up fury. So apparently Corey's main problem with the Gaza genocide is not that it's happening, it's that it's talked about too much. It's that...
Wait.
I don't have full context here, but I actually agree with that, with Bad Empanada, to point this out as problematic. Because, again, I'm missing context. I don't know exactly what video he's responding to, but all of this comes off as whataboutism, but also none of these are comparable to Israel, which is an ally of the United States, which is supported and funded by the United States. So to think that that Westerners have a standard for a country supported by the West, and that is different from Russia, China, Syria. And again, these are all places that are heavily condemned for what's going on there. It's not like these aren't condemned. Putin's considered a war criminal. Assad's considered a war criminal.
But Adar, like, the problem I have isn't that, look, I don't know the context, right? But it could be that it is about hypocrisy, and this is what he's talking about. I have no idea what he's talking about, Corey, what he's reacting to. But the conclusion that Bad Empanada is drawing seems totally out of line. It sounds like Bad Empanada is saying, based on what we're reading right now, the only problem that Corey has with the Gaza war is that we're talking about it too much. I'm not getting that from this. The only problem that Corey has with the Gaza war is that we're talking about it. Why is that at all a fair summary of what he just wrote? He might say there's hypocrisy and what's happening in Gaza is a disgrace. He could be saying both, right? But you're focusing on the hypocrisy piece, and I have no clue what his perspective on the war is, but I wouldn't know it based on this.
That is true, that his conclusion is wrong. But when Corey goes, the Jews do the same thing, and there's an industry of media, protesters, and talking heads in a whipped up fury, he's trying to compare things that are just not comparable in any way, shape, or form. So I'm not even commenting on Bad Empanada's interpretation of this. I just think that this comment, I do take issue with Corey's comment here. And, Corey's a friend of ours, so he's, of course, welcome on any time to discuss this. But to me, it comes off as whataboutism and comparing things that just aren't comparable.
I just don't know. Like, look, if someone were to say this, I'll tell you why I'm giving him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, because he says, what a load of BS. So I don't know what that means. If someone were to come and say, the only problem with the Gaza war is that it's just Jews doing it, and therefore the world is whipping up in fury, I would say that is of course that is not true, right? Actually, I wouldn't say of course that's not true, but I think it is fundamentally different from those other situations, right? So I don't know if it's bias. PN is saying that I might be biased here. I'm not sure what you're saying this on the basis of. I'm not saying that it is right to make these comparisons, or that the only reason why the world is reacting as it does is because Israelis are Jews. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it might be true. I think that the fact that he's making these comparisons in calling out certain hypocrisy, in and of itself, I would make that argument. I'm not a big fan of that kind of argument. Adar, and I think share the same, but I don't know what he's reacting to.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, look, here's the thing. It's not a good comparison. B, even if there was a hypocrisy, and again, we're missing context, so I want to acknowledge this. It's possible that there's something completely different going on had we really understood what this is regarding. But even if there was a hypocrisy, that's considered a tu quo quo fallacy. Pointing out somebody is hypocritical does not discredit their actual argument. So even if you could point that the whole world is hypocritical, that doesn't defend.
I just don't know what the argument is, though, right? So like the argument could be about somebody's character, right? So in which case, yeah, okay. So for example, Gandalf is asking, like, what would be a correct position here? I'm not entirely sure. I'm not saying that there is a way in which this is true. Am I saying that there's a way in which this is true? Yeah, I can imagine a world where everybody is so reflexively anti-Israel that when Israel does something that everybody else does, they get reprimanded more. Is it conceivable? I think it's conceivable. Is it relevant? I don't think it's relevant. At least I don't think that's a particularly relevant point. So it's, yeah, but it could be relevant depending on the argument. I don't know what the argument is.
Okay, yeah, we could acknowledge we're missing context, but I'm putting it on the record that I do take issue with this comment.
No, it's, yeah, but we need the context. Like, but I think you're making, okay, you're taking issue with saying that the only reason that people are getting whipped up into a fury is because they're Jews. Is that the claim?
No. I mean, like you could say that the first sentence requires context, but to say the Jews do the same thing as there's an industry of media protesters and talking heads in a whipped up fury, it's not the same thing. I mean, that's just incorrect. What Israel's doing is very different because it is supported and funded by the West. Also,
but bro, you have the same situation with like Saudi Arabia and Yemen.
No, well, Yemen is not supported by the West. Oh, you're saying Saudi Arabia,
Saudi arms. Come on, you want to tell me that like there's as much anti-Saudi like social infrastructure in American college campuses as there is with respect to Israel, even if the numbers in Yemen of dead people are equivalent? I mean, those are very different.
If we were to have daily videos of dead children out of Yemen, and what's military aid to Saudi Arabia? I want to check that, but I think there's some. But if there was a direct line where you can show that Saudi bombs are killing children daily in Yemen, I think there would be outrage over that.
Yeah.
Now, we could still try to make the argument that there's some level of anti-Semitism fueling the anti-Israel movement, and I actually think that happens to be the case. But I mean, it's still comparing things that you can't compare. These are not the same things, and even more so, it's not true that the Chinese, Russians, and Syrians do this and nothing happens. That's not true. Syria dominated the news cycle for years. Assad was considered to be a war criminal by much of the world. NATO considered invading. And when we look at the rate of children dying in Syria, it's significantly less than the rate of children dying in Gaza. And that's not even being funded by the U.S. So I don't
Adar, nothing comparable. So I think he's speaking kind of hyperbolically here because it seems like it's a comment. It's like a YouTube comment. So no one is speaking out. It's true. It's not that no one is speaking out, but he says almost no one is speaking out. No one is speaking out you're not seeing millions marching on the streets of Europe. You're not seeing those numbers. You're not seeing anything remotely close.
For who? For what? For Syria?
For Syria.
What's there to protest? They're not an ally of the U.S. or of the West. If Western nations,
you're not seeing millions marching for Yemen.
Correct. Well, I think Yemen is I think Yemen is fundamentally different. If you actually look at the amount of people and children and civilians killed from direct conflict, it's significantly less, especially proportionate to population size. What you do have in Yemen, you have a humanitarian crisis of malnutrition and still a lower rate of children dying. And I will go on to say there was a time a few years ago where Yemen was actually talked about quite a lot. But again, nothing comparable to what you're seeing with Israel.
Yeah, but look,
these are fundamentally different situations.
I think that's right.
And also the U.S. doesn't have this thing where they're scared to criticize Saudi Arabia. It's almost like more of a cold alliance. Like we know there's an alliance, but you don't have this thing where congressmen are going on Twitter saying, I support Israel's right to defend itself while you have 15,000 dead children. You just don't have that, right? So there's no comparison to really draw a parallel. But he's using examples of other conflicts that did dominate the news cycle, people who are considered war criminals. I mean, NATO considered invading Syria, right? NATO's definitely not considering invading Israel. It's being funded.
No, but he's not talking about whether there's like international, like whether the international system is slated against Israel or not. He's saying that there is an industry of media protesters and talking heads, right? Which is a little different.
Okay, it's we could continue, but this to me
Yeah.
is just comes off as it's just not
Look,
it's not.
that's not an argument I ever make, right? I don't make an argument like this because by my lights, it doesn't matter what other people do. The only thing that matters is like we have to hold ourselves to to as high an ethical standard as we want, right? And ideally, it should be ethical. Even the claim that sometimes they make about Israel being the most moral army. Most moral doesn't mean anything to me. It just needs to be moral, right? It could just be that everybody else is immoral. That says nothing about the standard I should hold myself to. So I normally don't think it's that interesting to make comparisons like this. You might need to make a comparison like this depending on the context. It could be that sometimes a context does justify making a comparison. So there is some sliver in my mind of there's some opening in which you can say, you know what? There's also an industry that is paid to criticize Israel, even when Israel is not to be criticized, or even in a way that is disproportionate to the actual harm that's being caused by Israel. I do believe that is likely to be true. In which case, and if you're referencing something like that, maybe the context there does kind of extenuate why you might want to bring it up. In general, this is totally not Corey's disposition to go and say, what about, right?
No, exactly. I was actually surprised by this comment. I'm wondering what fueled it, and I'd love to have him on to talk about it. But
yeah,
we can.
PN is asking, Adam, do you also agree that there's a lot of media that pushes Israeli agenda? Yes.
Oh, I actually think that the Western media is charitable to Israel more so than most other nations. I actually think that they get a level of charitability that most other countries wouldn't get. The only country I noticed that will get more charitability is the United States because they're talking about what they do. So, when the United States committed horrific war crimes in Iraq and in the Middle East, this was covered by the media. But when you have horrific war crimes in Gaza, it's actually for the most part covered, meaning like not reported on by most of the media. When you have a fraction of those war crimes in a place like Syria, it dominates the news cycle. You talk about needing to do regime change, right? So there's a level of charitability provided to Israel as a U.S. ally than anybody who would be outside of the sphere of influence. Russia, China, Syria, they get way less charitability because they're not in the U.S. sphere of influence. They're not.
I think both. I think you might get more charity and you might get less charity at the same time. So who was it that said this?
Perhaps
like
there's a decentralized nature of the media. It's not just
no. It's
journalists and reporters.
Yeah. But there's also something structural about it. I don't remember who I spoke to who's like in media, and they said, look, it's fun to criticize Israel because you get to go to Israel. And that's fun. So you go, there's a war, you hang out in Tel Aviv by the beach. It's fun. And you have an open media and a free press, and you get to go and grill people there. And you have a lot of discussions in Israel and a lot of self-criticism among Israelis. And so it just tends to be the kind of place that makes it very, very easy to create content around. So that comes from media. I spoke to a friend of mine who she did a master's in London in international law. And I asked her about what did you guys study? What did you ever talk about Israel? She said all the time. And I was like, why? I mean, there's a lot of cases. And she's like, Israel just tends to be pretty open about a lot of what's happening. Everything is quite out in the open. And so we have a lot of case studies. So it just makes for a very easy subject. So I feel like there are some structural reasons why Israel might also be maligned more so, but also some structural reasons, like you're saying, why it might be more charitably handled. Would you agree with that?
I would say that certainly plays into it. I do want to respond to Tessoman Maxima. Does Syria do bad things? Yes. Do they have an industry of media organizations and institutions dedicated to destroy the Syrian state? I mean, we could speculate on what this industry of media is. Let's just look at it in practice. For years, Syria dominated the news cycle with this attempt to garner up support for regime change. NATO considered invading on multiple occasions, and the media was building support for this. So yes, there was certainly a coordinated media effort to manufacture consent to topple Assad. That certainly happened, without a doubt. This was done for years.
No, it just seems so ineffective, right?
Well, Russia didn't allow it, right? Russia, Obama drew a red line, chemical weapons. Although I'm on the fence about. I didn't investigate it, but to me it's unclear who actually used chemical weapons. But according to the Western narrative, that red line was crossed. But Russia's like, we're not gonna. This is gonna escalate. We're not gonna let you do that. If it wasn't for Russia, there's a very good chance we would have seen NATO invade, kind of like what they did with Libya. They toppled Gaddafi. It took them only a matter of weeks.
No, but even
Russia stopped it from happening.
No, I even if what you still don't see is the same level of the same industry of media protesters talking. You don't see people like Bad Empanada making a name for themselves on YouTube talking about Syria. That's just like.
No, I'm not. I don't know. Have you looked into? Because I've only seen. This is the second video of his I'm watching. I'm not sure that.
I'm saying like the category of influencer and YouTuber and commenter and those people have not been making their names off of Syria because by and large people don't care. People didn't care. They didn't care that much. It wasn't.
There were a few years where Syria dominated the news cycle, a good two years or something. But I don't know why. It's what's true is this is a hot topic. Israel-Palestine's hot.
Exactly.
So yeah, there's people who don't care about the conflict. They have no skin in the game. They don't even have much interesting to say. But because the impressions are good, they make these interesting takes. I would say the majority of commentators on Israel-Palestine do it only because it's popular, not because they care.
Yeah.
And I can't make this claim. I don't know if I'm not going to make a value judgment about where Bad Empanada is coming from. But I do agree generally that because it's popular, people do talk about it for sure. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts. Because it's popular, it becomes more popular, right? Everybody hops on board because it's popular.
I think it's more nefarious than that. I think that it's the reason this is popular is because it has nothing to do with the Middle East. It has to and I'm saying just with respect to America. Americans find it very easy to reason about Israel and Palestine because it seems to be reinforcing the same narratives that they believe in and feel guilty about, which is narratives of colonialism and imperialism and slavery and white supremacy. And so there is almost when you see that, for example, if all of Israel was Ethiopians, okay, against the Palestinians, I don't imagine it would be nearly as hot a topic.
So I actually think this. Let's remove the video real quick because I actually want to go deeper on this. I think it's important to do an analysis on why Israel is disproportionately focused. So one point that I've already mentioned is that Israel is supported and funded by the West. So naturally, Westerners are going to be more interested in where their tax dollars are going and what their government's doing. That's one. But there's many other reasons. The other is just in terms of just look how many Muslims there are in the West. Right, you have many Muslims for every Jew in the West. So there's call it a PR war, a grassroots PR war. Muslims are almost by default going to be more, pro-Palestine, critical of Israel, and they very well may have a bias where they're going to be far less critical when it's Muslims killing Muslims. Right? It very well may be the case that the average Muslim has a higher sensitivity to Jews killing Muslims than to Muslims killing Muslims. So you have tens of millions of Muslims in the West, and they're hypersensitive to Jews killing Muslims. So when that happens, they talk about it, and that helps really put more focus on Israel. Another one is, as you mentioned, it has this white versus brown colonialism, right? It very much plays into left-wing social justice where, the white colonizer is oppressing the brown man. I think that's another. The third or fourth, it's a sexy conflict. It's the Holy Land. It's the birthplace of the Abrahamic religions. Evangelicals care about it. Jews care about it, right? So many people care about it. So it has a sex appeal to it.
Yeah.
And then we could also anti-Semitism, right? If you don't like Jews, you're more likely to be critical of Israel, right? So I think, what do we identify? 5 different reasons why this is a very popular conflict.
Yeah.
You want to? Is there maybe more?
No, I think this is all right. I'm not sure how I would weigh all these different things.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's okay. Gandalf is saying could it not? Okay, it certainly is also the case that you're seeing all these TikTok videos, right? And people are just genuinely animated by the sight of dead babies. 100%, all these different things, right? All I'm saying is that there are structural reasons why the attention we give to Israel-Palestine is different from the attention that we give Syria. And I just don't think that it's equivalent. The attention we gave Syria is not even close to being equivalent. And I'm not even saying the reason why. I'm not just saying it's only because of the colonialist narrative. It's that too, plus a bunch of other reasons. But at the end of the day, we do put a different type of focus on Israel-Palestine. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but
no, I actually agree. But I just don't. I think again, we shouldn't compare uncomparable conflicts, and we could identify. I think we identified reasons why it's different, but I still think that comes off as whataboutism and just trying to obfuscate and kind of just like look that way. Everyone's doing it. It's not just us.
Right.
That's how it's perceived, at least when I hear that argument.
That's right.
And
right.
and again, it's a YouTube comment. It lacks context. But even if Corey said what's happening in Gaza is horrible, I don't support it, but I definitely see a bias. That would have changed the entire. The entire feeling of it, but
that's what I'm saying. I think that requires context. I don't know what I mean. If you ask him, of course, that's what he would say, right? Like that's if
I imagine
when we just say something like this, then But also, it's we give it totally undue. But even if the thing that's interesting here is that even if it gets disproportionate media coverage, which I think it does, that still doesn't mean that what Israel is doing is incorrect or correct. Doesn't mean anything about it. It's just a sociological analysis about what's happening in the American mind. It says nothing about what's actually happening in Gaza.
Exactly. It's two separate issues, actually.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, let's bring it back up. Cool. Nice.
That people talk about it way too much. And apparently others are doing the same thing or much worse, which no, they're not. No, they're fucking not. Where else is someone massacring like this, proportionally this much civilians, this many children, this many clear non-combatants, women and the elderly? Nowhere. Like Chinese? Dude, how many people have even died in Xinjiang? Like maybe a dozen? Like, where are you getting this from? Then he responded to me after I told him to come on and debate me and just ignored it. Congo, 5.4 million killed. Ethiopia, 600,000 killed. Syria, 600,000 killed. Turkey, thousands of Kurds murdered and water cut off for millions. Guess who Israel supports there? Nagorno-Karabakh, thousands ethnically cleansed.
How is that relevant, though? Like that... We can keep going about who Israel is. I mean, he's trying to build a case about whether Corey's a Zionist propagandist. He just couldn't avoid taking the jab where he thought he could.
Although I think that was such an easy jab. I understand where that came from. Like if already somebody's going to point to other examples that you don't support, and Israel happens to support the side committing crimes, I think again, it's not a strong argument.
It has nothing to do with whether or not Corey's a Zionist propagandist.
Exactly, it has nothing to do with whether he's a Zionist, but I can understand it's
he couldn't
easy
help
to
himself.
slip that one.
Videos from Yonis. In factually incorrect. I made videos on those, but that's not that it matters. His entire argument is Israel should be allowed to do genocide, and it shouldn't be talked about as much because.
Wait.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Come on. This is almost beneath us to comment on.
No. I mean, to reach that conclusion, to saying that is a full endorsement of what Israel's doing, and then you can't talk about it. I would say that's a stretch of a conclusion.
More than an endorsement, because Corey might not believe that there's a genocide, but according to Bad Empanada, Corey thinks there should be a genocide, and that it's totally okay. The only problem with a genocide is that we talk about it. This is not serious.
Right.
What's happening in other places, which those things are not the same as this at all. This is way, way worse, obviously. And I would be glad to talk to him live and explain to him with clear facts and evidence how that is the case. But the thing with Corey is that he's exclusively able to talk to Palestinians on the street who are living under occupation, under constant surveillance, under duress. The only people who he can debate is random people on the street who are totally unprepared, who he holds a position of power over, given that he is an Israeli Jew and they are Palestinians living under occupation, and who are afraid to speak their mind for fear.
Wait. Okay, there's a lot here. Do you want to jump in? First of all, what's that?
You could hop in first.
The only reason that he can debate these people, first, he's not there debating, right? That's not his point.
Yeah, he's not debating.
Rarely debating anybody on the street as an Israeli in the West Bank. That is not the situation. If anybody has seen, sometimes he asks for clarification, and I appreciate that he does that. But to imagine that any of this is a debate is completely out of touch. The only reason he thinks he's able to do it is because he's an Israeli in the West Bank, and therefore he holds positions of power. I don't even think Israelis are allowed in the West Bank. Certainly not in the areas that he hangs out in.
No, he's
in
breaking the
Area A.
law. He's actually breaking the law when he goes in.
The dude is breaking the law when he goes there, and he's asking questions that are interesting to other people from abroad, and he thinks that represents a position of power. How does that make any sense? It feels to me like, is it the case that Israelis and the state has power over the Palestinians in the West? Of course, right? No one would deny this.
Right.
But to say that it's on the basis of that power that Corey is able, and only on the basis of that power, that Corey is able to go and ask questions in this way, I feel like the people that don't understand, they don't understand the details, might be totally distorting.
Yeah, and I would have to say to frame the Palestinians as under duress is a little bit of an exaggeration. It's true that they do live under another nation's military rule. It's true that waiting in checkpoints is a blow to their dignity and can be humiliating. It's true that they deserve better, but to think that they then lose all agency and cannot speak to an Israeli, like there's such an extreme power dynamic where you can't even speak. I mean, this probably is derived from Marxist philosophy, right? Because this is awfully similar to what we hear in like the woke social justice spaces, where like, you know, a black man and a white man can't argue because there's a power imbalance.
Right.
Like you strip away people's agency. It's essentially there's almost something racist about this. And I want to be clear. It is important to acknowledge power dynamics, but to take away the agency of people who have less power, so they're no longer human, right? You know who else likes to take away the agency of brown people? Racists. That's essentially what they do. They say that they're animalistic. They can't decide for themselves. They can't make these decisions. It's again, he might reach that conclusion from a different perspective, but essentially their end result is these people, they just, you know, they don't have agency, right? They can't speak for themselves. You can't trust what they say.
I just want to even understand, like in reality, yeah, you're right. SRG is saying bigotry of low expectations. In reality, what does that power actually translate to? I'm trying to understand this. The dude is there in the middle of Ramallah, right? He's there as, you know, like some people identify him. People might see this as Zionist propaganda. Some people identify him and say, oh, Corey, I saw your videos. This is immediately risky. In what possible scenario is he holding a position of power? Like, I don't understand.
He's risking getting in trouble from the Israeli government, and he's risking his life. He's actually risking his life. And for
honestly, and then for this guy to go and say that this is holding a position of power, it's just so perverted. I don't understand. Like, for all I know, somebody, next time he goes to whatever city, next he goes to Jenin, somebody will say, oh, this guy, I remember I watched a video. Corey is a Zionist propagandist. Let's mess with him. I don't know what they'll say, right? But sometimes he puts himself in positions that are genuinely dangerous, and he does that so that he can collect as much data and just share this with us. Right. Sure, every now and then he'll have some snark, whatever. Like, he's like totally missing the plot here.
And
sorry, Gandalf, I lost my cool.
and let's also acknowledge how important the work Corey is doing in really collecting data from both sides and showing it to the world. Corey's videos have taught me a tremendous amount about not only about the other side, even about my own side, because I don't go around. I have a general sense of public opinion in Israel, but I don't go around asking those questions. So I think it's a highly informative form of content, and one that he should be praised for, especially considering that he's taking a risk and barely making any money from. So it's a passion project.
Yeah.
Anyways, shall we continue?
We'll keep going.
Of summary execution at the hands of the Israeli security forces, because
wait. I think we missed something pivotal.
And who are afraid to speak their mind for who are totally unprepared, who he holds a position of power over, given that he is an Israeli Jew and they are Palestinians living under occupation, and who are afraid to speak their mind for fear of summary execution at the hands of the Israeli security forces. Because while he does sometimes blur out the faces of the people who he talks to, that's obviously not enough. Obviously, the Israelis are going to be able to track down someone based on their voice, based on their location. Like, they have the most dystopic surveillance network in the entire world. Palestinians are the most surveilled people in the entire world. If the bumblefucks at the NYPD were able to find the healthcare CEO shooter, Israel can find any Palestinian they want, regardless of how much their voice is distorted, regardless of how much you blur their face, especially in the West Bank and in Israel proper. Like, he can exclusively debate people who are oppressed for his benefit. He's a Canadian who voluntarily chose to move to Israel to receive ethnic benefits on nothing but the basis of his ethnicity, Jewish. He chose to move to Israel. And he clearly knows all about what Israel really is. Nonetheless, he stays there, doesn't he? So it's obviously not surprising that he's like this. It's obviously not surprising that he would argue that, like...
All right, let's pause it. I mean, first of all, he said summary execution, right? So, which is essentially a summary execution is killing a person without a fair trial. They're accused of a crime, they're rounded up and killed. Israel has a history of certain human rights abuses, but certainly not this, and certainly not.
I think that summary execution. I think people have made, decent allegations of summary executions. No.
In the West Bank for people sharing opinions?
No, not in the West Bank.
No. I mean, you've had unarmed like teenagers throwing stones, getting shot. There's an excessive force. There's low level of accountability. I mean, we could talk about the excesses of force and the problems with IDF and war.
You're saying recently, or even in history? I remember. I think there were cases in like Hebron in the early 2000s or whatever. Like whatever. I think there's some probably credible allegations of summary executions. I'm not well versed in them, but let's put a question mark on that.
No. I mean, even if you could point to a few examples, this is not a common war.
It's not a common. That's right.
Sharing your perspective. I would actually go on to say, so there is something true about his point that there's a risk when you're speaking to the public. There's many different competing forces here, and it's unclear how that skews the results, right? So there's a few. Let's talk about them. One is, this will be public, and you generally want people to perceive your side as the good guys. So you very well might frame it in a more gentle way, so you're not seen as hateful. On the Palestinian side, they do have to fear, maybe they have to fear what Israel might do. Although, we have dozens upon dozens of Palestinians in these videos saying, we need to rid the land of Jews.
That's by and large the main. Like, this is why I'm not quite sure if I'm understanding his argument. He's saying that Palestinians are scared because of Israeli surveillance. But nevertheless, so wouldn't that mean to you that they moderate their position?
Well, exactly. And then the other thing you could say is, if you're going to come too much of a peacenik position, then you might get backlash from the PA or from your neighbors. And I would say the bigger risk is not Israel. The PA arrests much more Palestinians for sharing views in the West Bank than Israel, but by significant margins. We even have examples. We used to do these peace meetups in Beit Jala in Area C, and we had some people get arrested and questioned by the PA for coming to these peace meetups. So you could see that there's many different forces, and it is unfortunate, right? These are all the considerations Palestinians need to take when speaking publicly, and I imagine many don't want to speak publicly, or many want to be anonymous. But it's super not clear that this is going to create a bias to one direction, and we have zero evidence whatsoever that people are being arrested from speaking on these videos, not by Israel, and definitely not being executed. That's just a very big claim that has zero basis.
But even if it's the case, so for example, I think I would draw a sharp distinction between Corey as the conveyor of what Palestinians think, and Corey as the conveyors of what Palestinians say when asked a question on the street. I'm not walking away saying, now I know what Palestinians think. I'm walking away saying, now I know what Palestinians say when they are asked this question on the street. For Corey to come in and say, actually, this is what they think, I think would be going a bit too far. He's never said that. He doesn't commentate. He doesn't analyze. And I asked him a few times, I was like, dude, create more content. I want to hear your perspective. And he's like, that's not the point of the channel. The point of the channel is to simply show people what people say when you ask them on the street the question. It's not to say what they think. And I think it's certainly not for Corey to then go and like just narrate what he thinks. Sometimes there's like a couple of interviews and stuff where you see him, and I find those very fun. And I would love to see many more of them, but he doesn't really do those. So I think that as a student of the media here, you should just take it with a grain of salt that you should just be aware that there is a distinction between what people say and what they think. And that gap is probably made up by a bunch of different factors, like what he's mentioning. They might be scared by their neighbors or because of the Israeli army.
Although, don't you think, though, even though he doesn't explicitly say this is what Palestinians believe, that's the likely conclusion people have when watching the videos, right? Like, I think
he needs to take a step back from that. I believe that the most honest thing he can do is get out of the way and simply not comment on that all that much. It's just keep doing what he's doing.
Maybe I think the case could be made that he could put a disclaimer, say, because of the nature of how these interviews are conducted, it's possible that this is not a full representation of the views of both Israelis.
No. That's not the bias. The bias isn't a representativeness. The bias is that the data itself is so skewed because people are unlikely to share what they actually believe in a public setting.
Well, we could assume with a high degree of certainty that the data is going to be skewed to some degree. We just don't know in which direction.
That's right.
I can't tell you in which direction it's skewed.
That's right.
Right. Even when I reflect on the Israeli interviews, Israelis, I think they want to paint Israel in a good light. So I think the most extreme people might hide saying the most extreme thing. So it's possible that the views we hear from Israelis are a little bit nicer than the average, right? I think that case can be made. So there's certainly some bias in just based on how the data is collected. And I think a disclaimer would be nice, but I don't think there's any he's not doing anything. There's no infraction here. He's not like intentionally misleading people. It's just, that's a suggestion. Put a disclaimer. I hear that.
I like the fact that so far he hasn't, and he's just totally. This is a simple project. People ask, people give him questions. He goes around, records people's answers. That's it. If you want to go and extend that to therefore the people believe that XYZ, that's on you. For Corey to then come in and start framing things, I believe it is more likely that he's going to get it wrong in some fundamental ways. I would much rather he keep the channel as clean as it is. At least I could see it. I could see arguments going both ways, but I would be very careful. If I now started to see him framing and caveating everything and bracketing everything, I'd be like, okay, now I don't know what is going on here.
Right. Okay.
Should we keep going?
Yeah, let's do it. We're almost there. We're an hour in and we've covered 5 minutes of video. Cool.
Like, talking about Israeli genocide is wrong because other people also kill people. Like, even if all of those things were as bad or worse, that's the best you got. You can't even actually deal with the facts on the ground. You can't actually talk about what is actually happening. All that you can do is try to divert attention away from it. Is that all you got? Not to mention it's not actually true, but it's besides the point. So yeah, that is what this guy is. Don't be fooled by his videos where he interviews genocidal Israelis and lets them speak freely. Don't be fooled that means that he is pro-Palestine or anti-Zionist, because he's absolutely not. And I think that already should have been pretty evident if you actually watch the videos where he talks to Palestinians, because you have to consider, for one, he gets editorial control. He gets control over what gets included in the final cut. If he loses a debate, obviously, he's probably not going to include it in the video. And besides that, even what he does include in the video makes it clear what he really believes, because he constantly argues with people. He constantly tries to refute them.
Who cares what he believes? I'm not understanding why that's relevant here. Yes, he's a person. He has beliefs. So what?
And also, he says it's clear he's not an anti-Zionist, as that's the expectation, right? It's like if he's not an anti-Zionist, then he's by default X, Y,
That's
Z,
right.
right? So there's
That's right.
something problematic in that framing. And
Yeah.
what I will say is, if you don't know Corey, you don't know if he's cherry picking or not, right?
That's right.
This is a challenge with this, right? Like, I know he's not because I know him. I trust you as well. You've done it with him. You know, we know he's putting everything in there. But if you don't know, you could assume or believe that perhaps he's removing things that are uncomfortable. But when you actually, if you watch enough videos, it's hard to reach that conclusion because he posts some pretty like atrocious views from both sides, you know,
That's right.
like
That's right.
whether it's ultra Orthodox or secular Israelis or Palestinians. I mean, just garbage across the board, you know, and he includes it all. So if you watch enough videos, I don't think you would reach that conclusion,
I
even
don't
if you
think
can't know for sure. So he's not
That's right.
editorializing it.
And if you wanted to experiment on that, it is very easy. Go there and just do one of the videos with him. It's very easy. Just get in the car, go record a bunch of stuff, and then see whether or not it makes it there. And it make not just is he not editorializing. This is when we go. Sometimes we go Saturday. It's hard to find people, right? You need to go. He's like, we have to go in different days because you need to get all of the opinions. Otherwise, even choosing where to film is going to give you a bias, right? So we say, okay, we ask these questions over here, but we're going to ask more questions over there. We have to balance it with it's a whole strategy to make sure you get as much juice out. It's not about being to distill the juice into only like a specific flavor. No, the whole idea is to get as much of it out. And if you are skeptical of it, you should fund his channel. First of all, everyone should fund his channel anyway. They just go and fund his channel. I don't know if he does if he's very aggressive about trying to promote it. Go fund it. It is all going to a very good cause. And I think that he has like different levels of like patrons or whatever. You can just see the behind the scenes. Oh yeah, the other thing is we go with two cameras. One camera is Corey recording, and the other camera is you recording Corey and recording anything else that you think is fun, and then like just the entire experience of like going and recording there. So we have two videos. We have two rolls of the entire day. You could just pay and watch what happens behind the scenes. You know, it's pretty clear.
I love how we're using this hit piece to do some fundraising for Corey. No, I support it. I think Corey does valuable work, and you know, the more support he gets, the more of this work he could do. So if anyone is interested in having more questions asked and collecting more valuable data on sentiment on the ground, then that's one of the best ways to do it. So thank you, Bad Empanada, for inspiring a little fundraising mission. We appreciate you.
Nice. Okay, should we continue? I think we're almost done.
Yeah.
Constantly tries to paint them in a negative light. He asks them, you know, leading questions to try and get them to say what he wants them to say, to make them look bad. So again, if that somehow wasn't already obvious to you, it should be obvious now from those comments.
Oh, that's it. Okay.
That's it. So, you know, I actually want to mention something which is ironic, but, you know, I'm currently in Oaxaca, Mexico, and Oaxaca, Mexico is known as one of the best food cities in the world. And the other day I went to a restaurant and I had the best empanada of my life. So it's interesting that we're doing this content.
Yeah, I don't, but okay, just to summarize his argument. What is the argument in defense of him being a Zionist propagandist? The fact that, let's just imagine that he's a Zionist, right? And let's just imagine that he's biased against Palestinians, okay? And let's just, you can imagine everything that Bad Empanada said could be true, and he still doesn't get his argument. He still doesn't get to the conclusion that he's a Zionist propagandist.
True. Can we be charitable and say it was just clickbait?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's very likely to be.
Yeah, because let me reflect on this for a moment, because I do titles that I think will be attention grabbing, but would I do a title that I would then not address entirely? I'm not sure. Maybe the viewers, you could point out if you feel that that I've done something like that, because I definitely look for the clickbaity titles, but I don't ignore. If my goal is to present an argument, I try to present it.
Okay, so Gandalf says that technically he is a propagandist, and that he says you are too, and by you I don't know if he means you in plural, maybe both of us, and then he says he is too. Not gonna lie, I think that's what NGL is, right?
I think he's
Gandalf
saying.
says, what can you say? Like, what is the?
I think he's saying everybody has like a bias, so therefore everybody doing public commentary is a.
Yeah. Okay. So again, the question is, Zionist propagandist means he's. So could it be that he's a Zionist propagandist, but has nothing to do with Zionism? Like, what is, when you pair up that adjective of Zionist, what does that mean? That he himself is a Zionist, or that he's spreading Zionist propaganda? So sure, insofar as Corey has any public presence, he's a propagandist. Fine, that is that is fine. But when this guy pairs it up with the word Zionist, what is the implication?
Right.
That he's there to try to propagate Zionist talking point. Like, is that the goal of the channel? I don't know. It means a target for aggression, Adam.
Casimir points out clickbait to get people harmed. So, Casimir, do you feel like this puts Corey at risk, or are you referring to something else? Because I heard somebody else say that Bad Empanada tried to unalive Loner Box. And is the reason we use unalive for the algorithm?
Yeah, I think
Kill.
so.
I'm okay with it. Kill. It's an okay word.
Oh no, but now we're gonna get defunded, and we're not gonna make the billions of dollars of this video would get you. Dude lost me when he called Adar an IDF murderer. Dude, he called you. He said.
He said I should be killed. For
yeah, didn't he say? No, it was funnier than that. He says, let's see. Actually insane that you introduce yourself as a mass baby killer. Is that how you introduced yourself?
No, my title was former IDF soldier appreciating the work you're doing, which was based on one video I saw of him reviewing the death toll in Gaza. And I figured, I imagine he gets a lot of emails. So how do I get his attention? It got his attention a few months later. But to not engage with anything I said, actually insane that you introduce yourself as a mass baby killer and expect that, you know. So he might have been in an emotional state, and upon reflection, acknowledging that calling for the killing of 70+% of the Israeli population probably is not a good policy. Maybe, but so far that's the hill he's dying on, because upon responding, he said I should turn myself into the police station in Gaza.
Adar, let me ask you this:
how many police stations left in Gaza?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I want to leave space for, I wouldn't say necessarily like genuine criticism of Corey and his project, but I would say responsible. How do we handle these answers responsibly? The answers that Corey reveals. I do think that like being mindful of the possible biases that can be introduced in this process is a useful and valuable exercise. And insofar as Bad Empanada is trying to do that, we should encourage him. I just don't think that that's what he's trying to do. If anything, the first person to tell you about the limitations and the constraints of drawing too many conclusions from Corey's project is Corey himself when you ask him. There's a bunch of different constraints, a bunch of different limitations. But perhaps insofar as we have an audience right now that is listening to Corey sometimes and to these answers, maybe it would be remiss of us if we didn't take the opportunity to highlight what some of these biases might be. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure. I want to make one comment just because we're getting farther away from it, but a friend actually pointed out something about Yemen, which I think is interesting. We were talking about like the double standard of Israel and why Israel. So what he pointed out, and I think it's a salient point, that Israel gets a lot of like just disproportionate public support from the United States, from senators and Congress people, and every presidential debate, it's a topic: Israel, Israel, Israel. So it's actually the pro-Israel side puts Israel front and center. It's actually not necessarily being put front and center by anti-Zionists. it's almost that it's being put front and center by those who support Israel, which naturally is going to put it front and center, where people will then look into it, investigate, and reach certain conclusions. So if there was like this narrative, we support Saudi Arabia's right to defend itself in Yemen, and there was all this, all these public statements supporting Saudi Arabia, you very well may have had much more backlash saying, wait a minute, why are we blindly supporting Saudi Arabia? There's this humanitarian crisis,
Right.
Why are we funding it, right? So I think that's also important to understand when understanding the double standard. So I think we identified five things that play into the double standard. I think this is a sixth.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Now let's.
So I think that the most glaring one for me is the fact that Palestinians might not say what they think because of different reasons. That to me is a huge problem. What do you do in order to actually hear what Palestinians think, and how to cut through the noise that might be introduced in by videos like this? I have some ideas, right? But I just want to like plant this flag there. I'm sure there is a distance, probably a wider distance, between what Palestinians say and what Palestinians believe. And what is the direction of that distance? Who knows? When I speak to Palestinians,
I don't even know how to assess that.
I just know that because I hear that from Palestinians, that they say, actually, that's not what we believe. That might just be what we say. I hear but that's, again, now I have, how many data points do I have of that? A handful? 10 Palestinians telling me that actually what they say isn't this. Here we go. Gandalf is saying it's also true that they're not a monolith, and lots of people can believe lots of different things. It could be that many people do say exactly what they believe, and other people don't. But I just don't know how to assess the distance between what they say and what they believe, given the fact that they're living in a society that has surveillance, both from the PA and from Israel, and that has a level of an expectation of conformity,
right,
because they have traders and things like that.
So there's actually an interesting way to solve this, right? In order to solve this, we need to identify if the average Palestinian, who they fear more when speaking publicly. Do they fear more Israel, or do they fear more their neighbors and the PA? Now, if you ask them this question publicly, you likely won't get a good response. But if we want to reach a conclusion as to in which direction the bias goes, we would need to do an anonymous polling of West Bank Palestinians and try to identify who they have a greater fear of when speaking out publicly, and hope that this anonymous poll would give accurate results. And if we could identify that, then we could identify to which side there's a bias.
So I asked my friend earlier this morning, he's from the West Bank. I asked him this exact question, and I was like, okay, if someone were to come up to you and ask you this question, or just any question, what would you say? And he said, I would try to minimize the risk of harm to me, right? I would try to maximize safety. And so I would try to say what I think is the most popular thing to say. Just the safety of the crowd. So what do I think other people think? I will say that. Because if the Israeli army comes to me, I can say, what do you mean you're coming to me? Everybody says the same thing. I'm not exceptional here. And then you also don't want to then be isolated from the rest of your community by saying something that is so. But he told me, but I told him, okay, but what do you believe in your heart? Closed doors. What do you say? And he said, I can tell you, but I don't know. I don't want to bias the conversation. But he says that it was a different answer. It is an answer that is much more congenial, much more peaceful, much less violent. That's what he says they say behind closed doors.
You're okay. You're saying they're taking a more hardline stance publicly than they do behind closed doors. That doesn't surprise me. I actually wouldn't be surprised in either direction because of the nature of these competing forces. You know who would kind of be good to talk to about this? He's so hard to pin down, but the mystery man Zahir, with a very soothing, sexy British accent. I don't know if you all remember Zahir, but he used to frequent on this channel. He's like a Palestinian intellectual who has great insight. His family is primarily from the West Bank. We should try to get him on at some point.
Yeah, let's do it.
To talk about this.
Elias says Corey doubts when they give peaceful answers. He doubts when they give every answer. He plays that game constantly.
Hold on, the messaging's here right now, just in case we could maybe.
Oh yeah, maybe we can pull him in right now. Okay, so I think that the fact that there might be a gap between what Palestinians say and what Palestinians say and what Palestinians believe. Could that gap exist among Israeli society? No doubt, right? It's just that they're operating in a very different type of like environment, and so it's likely to just produce a different effect. I think that's one bias. I would say that the other bias is it's not that easy to stop people in the street and get them to play along with you.
Right.
That's not that easy to do. And most people at some point, so there might be some selection bias there where you're likely to want to stop those people. Dude, we stay on the street, we go, we hold the thing, and we ask. Sometimes we have to ask, how many people do we have to bother before somebody says yes? 5 people, 6 people, 10 people? A lot of people don't want to play this game, so they just walk away, right? What does that actually mean? Is there a ideological distribution there that is being lost? You know what I mean? Like, is it only are certain ideologies more likely to stop and speak, or is it just certain personalities that are kind of evenly distributed in the population? You know what I mean?
Right. Look, here's the interesting thing. We could speculate on this all day, but we could actually solve this with headon.ai. We actually have a way to collect data based on demographics and over time try to understand, just get an answer to these questions, right? We can help improve, maybe not necessarily Corey's videos, but our interpretation of the responses by collecting this anonymous data through conversations. So I actually think you and I should brainstorm to how we actually, because a big part of what we're doing is collecting sentiment to provide solutions.
That's
so
right.
We should try to
for the AI to provide solutions. So to expose solutions and to offer solutions. Yeah. By the way, do you remember? Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, I just wanted to read a comment. Mr. Gandalf goes, sexy, LMAO, okay, Adar. So this is regarding Zahir's voice. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should listen to his voice. And I'll go on to say, there's 2 types of men who would call a man's voice sexy. We got the balloons coming up. I don't know why they do that. Anyways, there's 2 types of men who would call another man's voice sexy. A gay man, or a man that is very comfortable he's straight and he's very comfortable in his sexuality. You could make an assessment for yourself which category you believe I fall into. There's one more. There's one more.
We're gonna make different assessments. But...
there's one more. I want to read something Casimir wrote because I thought this was an interesting comment. Casimir goes, Corey's bias is that he is generally leftist, atheist, academic, and is willing to upload anything that is impactful, even if it contributes to awful stereotypes. Uncritical minds can't handle this. It's an interesting analysis. Yeah, there's something I do because there is something academic about Corey's approach, right? It's like, this is data, we upload it. I don't care what happens. This is just the process, right? Right. So I think there's a good point there.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny because I spoke to my cousin today. My cousin watches his videos, and actually, my cousin was interviewed. We did a long. He came back from Gaza after being there for like 2 months, and then Corey and I went to record it, and it was close to my cousin's house. So I asked my cousin knows Corey. I was like, dude, you want to come? Maybe we could do a piece. Just come and tell us everything that happened to you in Gaza. What did you see? What did you not see? And Corey did like a sick interview with him. He asked him a lot of questions. It was a hard-hitting interview, and then he sent it to me to upload. And I was like, okay. And then he said, just confirm with your cousin that it's okay to upload because we know soldiers normally, it's very difficult to get soldiers because they're told that they can't, right. And my cousin last minute was like, my commander said that I'm in uniform and I can't participate in the media like right now. So that really sucked. But what was that in connection to? I forget. Oh yeah. So I spoke to him this morning and I told him that we're that we're going to be discussing Corey and potential bias, and he's like, yeah, because he's anti-Israel. Like that was his impression. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, are people gonna, criticize him because he's so anti-Israel? And I was like, no. The criticism is he's a Zionist propagandist. My cousin lost his mind, right? So different people will walk away with very different impression here. But I think that speaks to the strength of what he's done.
Anybody who's standing somewhere in the middle will be perceived as an extremist by either of the extremes, or they would be perceived on the opposing side by any of the extremes. I'll just, a personal anecdote. I constantly get messages calling me a capo and a self-hating Jew. And I also get messages that I'm a Zionist supremacist and a racist, right? Like, this is just across the board. I like to consider myself a Zionist supremacist capo. That's how I like to refer to myself. So please refer to me.
Gandalf is asking how this is going to affect the legacy of Head On. So actually, what's something interesting we did one day is we asked an AI researcher of ours to index all of the responses from Corey's videos. I should have asked Corey for permission. I haven't done that yet. We indexed all of it into like this, like a vector database. And then why did we do this? Because at one point we were saying, oh man, we really have a question and we don't have Palestinians in the room, and there weren't Palestinians to answer the thing. So I said, oh, what if the AI is smart enough? It's just an agent, and if there's a question that's relevant, that's similar to the question that we're bringing up in the conversation, just pull in some of the Palestinian videos from Corey's channel, like very specific Palestinian videos from the channel. At least we'll have some content to speak about until we have more Palestinians. So yeah, I don't know what else we can do. But
I actually think that over time, we actually spoke about this a little bit yesterday. We are going to be able to do something similar to what Corey's doing at a much larger scale. If we're able to scale Head On and we have, let's say tens of thousands of Palestinians engaging there, we're going to be able to collect a level of data on sentiment that just one person driving around doing interviews cannot. We also, the AI, it's not just asking a single question, it's analyzing people in conversations. So it's actually getting to the bottom of their beliefs. So we're going to be able to get a much more data from each individual, not just what they say they believe, but try to get to the bottom of their beliefs through them engaging in enough conversations. That said, there will be a bias with Head On as well, because some types of Palestinians are going to be more likely to use the platform than others. So we can't claim to get the full representation of Palestinian sentiment, but we will have the ability to collect, if we can scale this, to collect sentiment from tens of thousands of Palestinians, and on a really deep level to help inform us as what are potential solutions. So that is something we are working to build, to integrate within Head On.
By the way, Corey, I think he said that we can pull him into these if people have questions or something. If people also are if there's any interview that he did that they would like to get more context on, he said just ask him. He's very receptive. Just ask him. He'll tell you. He can join, and I think he's gonna join. He might join some of the. He's gonna join some of the stuff that we're having on Discord. I don't know if right now it's probably getting late, but we should probably move to Discord.
Yeah. Let's take the after party to Discord. Also, I interviewed Corey on this channel a few years ago, so I'm happy to drop that for anybody to view it. But this was 3 years ago already. So yeah, we should definitely bring him on for round 2. We're long overdue, and he's supporting us with Head On, so he's officially an advisor.
Yeah.
Cool. So hold on. That's the interview with Corey. I'm now going to drop a link. It's also in the description for whoever's watching this after the stream. We're doing over a dozen conversations a week on Discord for the Head On community. This is our earliest adopters who are going to help us build the culture on Head On. They're going to be our first users. They're going to be our beta testers, and they're going to help us train the AI. So right now we're just getting the ball rolling by having nearly daily conversations on Discord. So whether you're joining now for the after party or you join anytime, in the future, we'd love to have you join and just be part of this community. Because what we're trying to accomplish at Head On is not at all novel. There's no guarantee we succeed. It's, Adam and I are both entrepreneurs, so we're delusional. We're confident we're going to succeed. But I also want to ground this in reality that we are attempting something very, very challenging. Our chance of success is that much greater if we have a strong community with us building this. So that's my my call to action. We would love to have you all join us.
Yeah. By the way, did we want to see if anybody wants to join? Oh yeah, we wanted to speak to people in the audience, and I know that there's been a few people that have been asking to join. Maybe we do this. Should we either do it on the stream now, or should we just like hop back into the into one of the rooms for the after party?
Yeah. I'm just, so for those who join Discord, you'll see it says after party, Sulha live stream. Click there. You don't need to speak. You don't need to show yourself. You could be anonymous, but you're also welcome to engage. It's an open conversation for everybody. So what you'll do once you join Discord, on the left-hand side, you'll see a bunch of different tabs, but one of them will say after party. You'll see people in there. Just click and you'll be in. I already see we have Casimir joining, and cool.
Right.
It should be all
right.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Real quick, this Friday, damn, what time is it going to be at? Whatever, I'm going to post it. But this Friday, I'm interviewing Andre. He is a Russian Israeli who does a lot of work documenting what's happening in the West Bank. He's been arrested multiple times. He's been attacked by settlers. He's a very courageous individual. So we're going to have him on for a live stream this Friday. I believe noon EST, something like that. But I'll obviously post it here on Instagram and all the relevant places. So I would love to see you there as well. Cool. To the after party.
Thank you, everybody.